Tough morning for the Mississippi State family, Texas Tech, Washington State, obviously Coach Mike Leach's family, as the news is official through Mississippi State University that Mike Leach passed away last night at UMC with heart complications. And so we're going to celebrate Mike Leach today. We've been dropping audio left and right, telling stories. The stories from the book Swing Your Sword by Mike Leach and Bruce Feldman are amazing. I've read the book a couple of times, just incredible. His legacy and his impact on people in the game is just second to none. And you see the air raid concepts and schemes on Friday night, Saturdays, and Sundays, and you will. And his coaching tree is just unbelievable. And so we welcome in a football historian himself, Mike Detillier, WWL Radio TV New Orleans. Mike joins us on the Yuengling Lager guest line. Mike, talking about his legacy, I mean, if you were sharing Mike Leach's legacy and impact like 10 years from now, what would you say to somebody that may not know as much about Coach Mike Leach?
Well, his impact on the game. He was a unique personality, which made it easier, I guess, that concept of the air raid system, because him and Hal Mumme sort of brought this into college football. We had seen bits and pieces of it before. Lavelle Edwards had some bits of it when he was coaching at Brigham Young. And we saw Spurrier, his impact at Florida. He was at Duke before. But this was a little different. And so how they attacked you, which offensively they ran sort of the same plays but out of different formations. So it wasn't super complicated. And, man, I got a lot of information about Mike for meeting him through Sonny Dykes because Sonny's first head coaching job was at Louisiana Tech. And Sonny would talk about Mike all the time, about how Mike sort of went after you, offensively. And he said, you see the impact all across high school and college football. And he said, it won't be long. He said the NFL, sort of hard-headed, they're going to come in a little bit later. And you see it there, too, with a lot of the younger coaches bringing in certain concepts of it. But how maybe the thought of it didn't have that personality like Leach did. I mean, Mike was unique in how he spoke and how he could explain things and how he could get off subjects. I think looking back during my run, the most unique personalities to answer or not answer questions, Les Miles had that sort of deal too. You asked him something and sometimes you sort of shook your head about, or you forgot what you asked him originally. And he'd come up with an answer. He'd give you something that's not what you would think, and Mike was like that too. And the only other guy that I know of that would talk about Pirates as much as Leach did is the guy I work with, Bobby Hebert. Hebert talks about Pirates all the time, but so did Leach. I mean, so it would have been the perfect marriage there. But I think if you're looking at it historically, I think what he brought along with Hal changed this game from three different levels, in that you see a lot of the concepts of that air raid, and you saw it in college and certainly the high school ranks. You see it that's done a lot, and now it's into pro football. Very few people have had that type of impact. Bo, I'm just telling you that there ain't a lot of people that have that type impact. and what it's done. It's opened the game for teams that have this right combination of pitch and catch, and it's sort of, maybe you saw it yesteryear where you would do it out in somebody's backyard. You were doing it on a football field, a pitch and catch. And so it's a huge impact on the game, how it changed it. I think it has made the game more open for others to be competitive at the collegiate ranks.
Yes.
And I think that's the biggest part of you before, a Texas Tech or a Baylor or a Washington State. Come on, that's not a perennial power in football, okay? But he was able to make it through that, and proteges, what you see now at TCU with Sonny. Sonny took a lot of what he has done and what he learned through Leach and sort of put it in his own little capsule. And everybody's done that across the board that has worked with him. They've taken a bit and a piece of it and used it in their own little game, and you see it. Cliff does a lot of it now with the Arizona Cardinals because he was part of that. And Sean McVay has talked in the past about, in watching a lot of what Leach was doing in different places, that he's used some of those concepts. You have now in the NFL, they'll hire a coach that will watch what's happening in the college game to see how much of that can be transferred to the pros. And I think a lot of that had to do with Mike and with how originally put in.
Mike Detillier on the Yuengling Lager guest line, Out of Bounds, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. Mike Leach passed away Monday at the age of 61 years old. And his legacy, his impact on the game, we will continue to celebrate Coach Mike Leach. And Mississippi State was fortunate to have him, the Pirate, for 3 years. He went 8-4 this year, top 10 strength of schedule. He had road wins in 3 years at LSU, at A&M, at Auburn, at Ole Miss. Come from behind wins. As Mike was just describing, Leach gave his teams the ability to get down and come back because you could play pitch and catch. And we all know that Mississippi State was a 3 yards in a cloud of dust for the most part for 100 years, outside of a little bit of Mullen. Leach had come from behind wins against La Tech, NC State, A&M, Auburn, Ole Miss, among others. And that's just in a short period of time. And I think where Mike really nailed it was he leveled the playing field. And that's what you're looking for, because not everybody's Bama. Most everybody is not Bama, LSU, and Georgia. Mike Detillier on the Out of Bounds show. Mike, how about Sonny Dykes in his first year at TCU in the college football playoff? A Mike Leach, disciple.
He's a protege.
Yeah.
He's a protege. Listen, I know when Mike first got the job at Tech, and we spent time together, he spoke so much about Mike and about his ability to find a weakness defensively. And you hear it a lot about breaking the link in the chain. And he said, Mike wasn't about breaking the link. He was about obliterating the link in the chain. And it wasn't this super complicated offense. He made it simple, and again, it goes back to running sort of the same plays, but out of a different formation. And so it sort of gave you a different look and got you to thinking. And Sonny would always bring up the fact that if I can get a receiver who's got an advantage over a defensive back, and I can hit a couple passes on him, then it gets in the head of that defensive back. And he said, I think that was part of Mike's genius, that he was mentally now messing with you, okay? Because he knew eventually you were going to break. And what Sonny's done, and Sonny's career, when you look at it, has some similarities to Mike. He goes to Louisiana Tech, he wins there, and he goes to Cali, and it's so. And he gets fired there. And, I'll put it to you this way with Sonny. He wasn't at Cal Berkeley long. He was looking to get out. It wasn't exactly his cup of tea at Cal Berkeley. And, for him to go to SMU and then get this chance at TCU, he knew that Texas, because of his dad, because of his connections in the Texas high school ranks, he knew the Texas scene very well. And him offensively, he was differently kind of built than Patterson was, and how to go after you. And so he had a lot of similarities to Mike. And now he couldn't talk like Mike. I mean, Mike was unique on that part. But Sonny took a lot of that and has used it to build up TCU. And and his deal was always, even when he was at Tech, was that we don't necessarily need the 5-star players to win. We have a concept that we can take, because he said, how are we going to compete against an A&M or a Texas or an Oklahoma or an LSU to come in here to grab top players? We understand we're not going to get those guys. But with the amount of players in the state of Texas, we can be really good. And I'll paraphrase it, with the twos. Doesn't have to necessarily be the ones. And you see what he's done in year one, and going up against some of those same teams. One thing he learned from Mike was, don't be fearful of getting in the ring with the top teams, because I think that was something Sonny spoke about a lot that he learned from Leach, was about, listen, a lot of times you get beat before you hit the field.
Right.
It's in your mind. He said, Mike was one of these guys, he didn't care who he played. He thought he was going to beat him. And Sonny was, you coming from the high school ranks and being part of it with his dad, I think there's always talk about, that team's better than us. We got to find a way to win. And, and Leach's deal was, I don't care who we playing, we're going to win. And so he said, he had a different concept to going after an opponent. And he said it was different than my dad, different from other coaches I'd been around, that it didn't matter to him who we played. We going to find a way to win. And he didn't want to hear about another team had more talent. What he wanted to hear about was find a way to win. And I think what sticks in my mind, opening game after LSU just steamrolled everybody in 2019, start that game in 2020. And I've told this to Coach O, that game basically got you fired.
Mm-hmm.
Just the way they went after them.
I mean, think about it. They put 700 yards up on the defending national champ, Mike.
And you could see LSU had no recourse against that. That there was a lot of looking at one another about what in the world has happened here. And, it was Costello who just drilled them every which way but loose. But it was Mike's concept, because a lot of times when you're going to play a defending national champ, okay, you're not playing the same team, but there's an air of confidence about that team. Okay, we won it last year. Okay, we got it. We ain't got no fear about Mississippi State. We ain't got no fear of them. No, Mike flipped the script. He flipped the script on them. We ain't scared of you. I know one thing, that guy playing quarterback ain't Joe Burrow. And, and there was no Jamar Chase, and that was no Justin Jefferson, and no Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Hey, we're not scared of those guys. And believe me, I've had this conversation with Coach O, and I told him that game got you run off. It was not just a beatdown. It was an embarrassment. It was an embarrassing loss for a national champion to get beat in the manner that Mississippi State did it. And see, that was the genius of Mike. that, he did not let his team fall into that sort of crevice that sometimes happens. Man, we playing national champions? And his deal was, no, they playing us. And you could tell almost from the start, Bo, that game had gotten out of line real quick.
Yeah.
LSU had, if it was like, you're playing cards, dude, you got dealt a lot of low hands. You weren't winning. You weren't winning many hands that night, and LSU had no. And at the end, they had LSU players sort of laughing and cutting up on the sidelines, and that's when you could sort of see, they had spent way too much time sitting in the back of the limousine waving to the crowd.
Right.
And Mike Leach exposed that. Mike was the first, and you talk about a crack in the vase. That was it. It exposed LSU the rest of the year, and I'm convinced that game really not only was the start, but you always going to look back and say that's what got Orgeron run off from LSU.
He is Mike Detillier, Mike D, WWL Radio TV New Orleans. He joins us on the Out of Bounds show. We are celebrating the life and coach of Coach Mike Leach, who passed away at 61 years old yesterday as the sitting head coach at Mississippi State University. Mike, a friend of mine, Dave Bartu, said that no one has been able to run the pure air raid outside of Mike Leach. There's plenty of modified versions, and Sonny Dykes, as you referenced, is in the college football playoff with TCU, is doing it. And Kendall Browse and Lane Kiffin and many, many others. But as far as the pure air raid, no one has been able to leave the nest and run the pure air raid with any kind of success. That's tip of the cap credit to how good Mike Leach is.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Sonny runs bits and pieces but Sonny had his own concept too about how to run it, and Kingsbury also. There are different variations of it. The same, sort of deal what we've seen at times with different things that have been innovative in the game. If it was the 3-4 defense or whatever, I don't think the 3-4 defense was run the same as when Bum put it in, with the Houston Oilers in the early 70s. There were variations of it. Mike sort of did the exact same thing with the air raid that other teams have copied bits and pieces of. Everybody has. Every team in college football has, to a certain extent, with the exception of probably the academies. But everybody else has taken a bit and a piece of it. And, because Sonny had his own concept of how to run an offense. But a lot of that was based off of what he learned from Leach.
Absolutely.
But it was not.
And, Mike, you remember when.
Pure part of it, but it was about as close as you're going to get. Because if you watch Texas Tech in the past when Mike was there, and you watch TCU today, there's certainly a lot of similarities in what Sonny has done there, and what but Sonny didn't run that type of offense at Cal. It was a little bit different because they didn't have quite the personnel. Now, when he came back and it was at SMU, it had a lot more similarities. And today when you watch TCU, there are some similarities. But I would agree that Mike was the originator, and nobody ran it exactly like that. But we've seen a lot of different concepts of it, and even Lincoln Riley has, when you watch his offenses, if it was at OU and now at USC, depending on the quarterback play, because that does make a difference. There are some things there that sort of round peg, round hole, square peg, square hole. I mean, you can see that there's some similarities to it. But man, Mike's impact on this game is massive. There are very few people, coaching-wise, that have had that type impact. And again, I go back to it, not only affecting the college ranks, but also in what high school teams saw they could do, and now the professionals saw they could do. That all came from Leach. That all came from him. How many coaches you can say that that's happened to? Now, on defense, I could say Bum did it. Because
for our listeners, Bum Phillips.
Because back in the early 70s when Bum became the defensive coordinator with the Oilers, he took a college concept and he brought it into the NFL. Sid Gilman was the head coach of the Oilers at that time. And Sid said that he had never seen anything like it. And the concept was to hide where you were going to basically rush the fourth guy. That's what the 3-4 was about, sort of hiding where that fourth guy was going to come from up front. And everybody kind of stole what Bum did, 3-4 defense. We saw Belichick take a part of it, and Parcells and Belichick take bits and pieces of it, and they used it with the Giants. But they had Lawrence Taylor. Come on. Bo, at that time, and if I had LT, I could have come up with some concepts too, but that part about, I look at it offensively, is what Mike Leach did to change it is similar to what Bum did. Now, it was already there in college, but now themes in high school football were going to run into 3-4. Before that, it was all 4-3 defense, all 4-3. And Bum sort of changed the world defensively at that point. Mike has done the same thing in the region of pitch and catch, of throwing the football.
We'll leave it there. Mike Detillier, football historian on the Yuengling Lager guest line, celebrating Coach Mike Leach and his impact and legacy on the world of not just college football, football at any level. Mike D., thank you so much. Wonderful stories today. We'll talk next week.
All right. Thank you, Bo.
Mike Detillier, WWL Radio TV New Orleans. He joined us on the Yuengling Lager guest line. Want to say good morning to you. We are the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. Coming up at 9, we'll have Dave Bartu. Dave Bartu, college football matrix. Who did he have number one on his board when it didn't work out with Joe Moorhead? And it's documented. He had Mike Leach. And Leach made his way to Starkville, Mississippi. And what a pioneer. Now, that's a word that you want, affiliated with your name. Innovative, a pioneer in the football coaching industry. Mike Leach passes away at 61 years old yesterday. We'll have Dave Bartu coming up next on the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN.